Started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our Conscious Conversations. I'm Peter Daniel, I'm your host, and tonight I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Dr. Bernard Brom. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Brom. I'm so excited to listen to you.
Yeah, real pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we're going to run through, I did post your bio because, you've been into the world of natural health for decades. How many years is it now?
Well, since 1978.
Sure, okay. And you're the person who actually brought integrative medicine to South Africa, is that right?
Well, I started the South African Society of Integrative Medicine, and I can't even remember what year it was. Oh, it was the year 2000. I do remember. The year 2000, I started South African Society of Integrative Medicine. Before that, we had the South African Society of Complementary Medicine. Okay. And that's where doctors actually started. And then I started the South African Society of Integrative Medicine. And and since then, the doctors have belonged to that organization, those that are interested in more natural approaches or more holistic approaches to medicine.
Great. So you were just telling me before we got on live that you're retired now. So is most of your work training doctors?
Yeah, look, I retired because I'm almost 80 now, I retired when I was about 73, 74. So, I worked a long period of time, so it was enough for me. And I really wanted to get into teaching and more teaching and writing. So, yeah. And somebody came along and wanted to buy my practice. And I said, that's fine. Let's go. And I was living in Stellenbosch at the time and I wanted to move. It was getting too cold for me up in the mountains. Okay. I wanted to come down to the sea level and enjoy the seas. So, yeah, that's where I am.
Fantastic. Well, I've got your book, which I highly recommend everyone on the call gets a copy of, Healthy Medicine. It's one of my favorite books, and that it's written by someone from our own country is just amazing. Usually have to go to America or the UK to find something of this quality. So thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah, and you see the cover has got a spiral, and that spiral is very meaningful to me because spiral is like a system rather than parts. You can't take a spiral apart, and human beings are systems. They're not parts. And for me, that's why in fact, that spiral was drawn on the beach of Noordhoek. My wife took that photograph on the beach. We drew the spiral on the beach and then took the photograph, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So, that's a good place to start, particularly in the world we live in today with this scare that we've had this year. It seems, and I've been looking at it for years, just being an avid health researcher, not a medical doctor, but kind of on the edges, looking at how medicine is practiced and particularly how the dogmatic disease-centric healthcare model or system runs. You initially came from that system yourself. Maybe just give us a bit of background on how your process went from, studying through that system and how did you change? What changed for you?
Yeah, so in 1970, I was specialising in gastroenterology. I'd done 2 years in South Africa and decided to go to America. They said in America, you can live your dream. I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to live my dream. So, and the truth is you can live your dream in America. In fact, it only took me 6 months to live my dream and I was still unhappy. So I thought, no, this is crazy. I've come to America to live my dream, to be happy, and I'm still unhappy. I was unhappy not only with medicine, but with my life as well. And then as a result of circumstances, I decided medicine wasn't for me. So I gave up medicine in 1971, walked out of my practice in Miami, Florida, and bought a Volkswagen kombi in Europe, and basically joined the hippie movement in 1971, 72, 73. Eventually went to Sri Lanka, also really not practicing medicine at all. And then from Sri Lanka, went to India to find my guru. Found him. He was named Dr. Kaushik. He was a medical doctor, actually, but a very, very wise man. And then lived with him for almost a year. And then went back to America, Canada, married my girlfriend in Canada, and we decided to have our children in South Africa. Came back to South Africa as a hippie still. I bought a small holding and thought I was going to farm, and realized that as a hippie you don't make money, and nor as a small holding farmer you don't make money. So I went back into medicine, and that was quite a revelation to me, coming back into medicine and starting in a small valley up in Stellenbosch in the mountains. The only patients that I had initially were the farm workers walking past. And the interesting thing was that I started to re-look at what I was doing, like using drugs. And it was the first time that I can remember that I actually thought to myself, wow, these drugs are powerful. They have side effects which are really serious. Can I, as a medical doctor, with my ethics, continue to practice medicine using drugs that have serious side effects? And so I made a decision then to see if it's possible to practice medicine without drugs. And I think I became the first doctor in South Africa, and probably remain the only doctor in South Africa who practiced medicine without drugs. If a patient needed drugs, I would send them down the road to one of the doctors, because I really didn't feel ethically okay to use drugs. I mean, I think there's a place for drugs, but at the time, you know, I felt uncomfortable. And then another thing that happened to me was that, because you must remember that I hadn't practiced medicine at all. I was just seeing all these hippies using herbs and homeopathy. And then a nurse came to see me as a patient, and she had been working for a naturopath in Cape Town. And she gave me a diet sheet that he used. And the diet sheet was very, very simple. It was nothing more than baked potatoes and onions. And I started to give this diet sheet to my patients, baked potatoes and onions, for 1 month. And I only knew 2 remedies. The one was kelp, and the other was brewer's yeast. And kelp is seaweed, full of minerals. Brewer's yeast is full of vitamin B's. And those were the 2 remedies that I had to give my patients, and the diet sheet. And I started to see miracles very quickly, and I couldn't understand what's going on. All I was doing was a simple diet, plus kelp and brewer's yeast, and patients were getting better from rheumatoid arthritis, asthmas, allergy problems. It took me a while to work out these were all farm workers. And what were they eating? White bread, junk food, processed foods. And I was taking them off unconsciously, because that's not what I thought I was. I mean, I was just giving them this diet sheet. And that changed everything for me, because I saw a simple diet with natural food, using simple brewer's yeast and kelp, and people were getting better. And I thought, but these are not drugs. How can they be getting better? And that's how I started my whole process, the realizing that just by simplifying the diet, removing people from junk food and processed food, and giving very simple nutrients, and that the nutrients were supporting health in the body, because they weren't drugs. They had no side effects. They were just supporting health. And that's where the whole model of started for me, recognizing that what I was doing was complementing the body's natural healing capacity. And that just by doing that, just by supporting health in the body's intelligence was able to do the healing work. And so that's where my practice started. And then very quickly, I also learned acupuncture. And even that was an interesting story, because I was sitting next to a homeopath who kept saying to me, "You don't need needles for this acupuncture." I said, "What do you mean you don't need needles?" He said, "Oh, you can use a laser." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah, and if you got a few days, come and spend it with me." And I did. And he showed me how you could use a laser to stimulate an acupuncture point instead of needles.
Wow.
And for the first 2 years of my acupuncture practice, I never touched a needle. I just used a laser. Laser is very one-pointed. And that was a remarkable thing, because I always thought that the needles were kind of a placebo response, because patients could feel this needle going into their skin. But with the laser, you can't feel anything. And I suddenly realized that these things actually work, and that they must be working on some kind of maybe energy level. And so that, because traditional Chinese medicine talks about energy in the healing practice, and that also shifted my mind away from biochemistry to the understanding that the body is also run through and through with energy manifestations, and that you can, with needles or laser, change the energetic dynamics dynamics of the body, that because I realized that biochemistry moves much too slow to coordinate healing. It's too slow. It moves by centimeters a second, whereas light moves around at 1,850 kilometers a second. So it had, in order to coordinate all the healing processes in the body used with the billions of cells, there had to be an instantaneous almost movement of information around that body. And that energy had to be there as well, and that we needed to understand about energy. And so that's how my process started, and how I slowly moved into a different dynamics of healing.
Okay, sure, that's amazing. So maybe for those who don't understand, like the mechanistic reductionist worldview of the body, and drugs being the only thing that can heal people, as allopathic medicine is practiced now. I mean, as far as I'm aware, that's a pretty new thing. It's only the last 100 or so years. Maybe can you give us a bit of background? How is it that most medicine is really just drug pushing?
Yeah, so if you think of all traditional systems, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine, whether it's Ayurvedic medicine, shamanistic medicine, all these systems of medicine came about because they felt, they intuitively had to work and understand the way things work. I mean, if you think about Chinese medicine, which is 3,000 years old, first textbook was written 2,000 years ago. Textbook. If you look at the complexity of Chinese herbal medicine, I mean, one of my Chinese teachers wrote 5 books on one acupuncture point. One acupuncture point, 5 books. Where does that information come from? How did they develop that information without the scientific understanding that we have today of the body? Mm. So there was some kind of intuitive, experiential process that was at work there that always interests me, that we can know things without science. I have a friend of mine, not a friend, but a colleague who was a physicist, and he would say things to me like, Bernard, what you just said is not scientific. And I would say to him, what about your relationship with your wife? Do you have a textbook every time you meet her? You don't have a textbook. Your relationship issues are the result of experience and interaction with people. So we can learn a massive amount just from our experience and our awareness, and we have all the qualities we need to understand how things operate. So I think that the way traditional systems have worked have come through direct experience. Mm. What happened was that at some point, and that was about 150 years ago, doctors started to do postmortems on the body, and they discovered pathology. And the moment they discovered pathology, they started to connect symptoms and signs to the pathology. And they said, now we know what the cause of symptoms and signs are. It's because of pathology. And so this started the pathologizing of medicine, where we started to look for pathology to understand illness. And from that, we started to cut the body open more and more, and then we got into biochemistry. So we kept looking for physicality to understand symptoms and signs. If it doesn't have anything physical, we start to call it syndromes, So, or we say it's all mental, it's psychological stuff. So medicine today is based on pathologizing illnesses. And so even psychiatry today, which was a kind of stepchild of medicine because there was no pathology in the early days, they discovered biochemistry, and that all problems of psychiatric problems have to do with neurotransmitters and serotonin and dopamine and things like that. So they keep looking for physical things. But, the point is that the human being is much more than just physical. We are, what I call in one of the chapters in my book, I think, has to do with the greater anatomy, which is body, emotions, mind, spirit, consciousness, and matter, energy, information. So quantum. So we are a matter, energy, information, quantum system, very complex system. And we can't just confine human beings to biochemistry only when there's energy as well. and where energy moves much faster than biochemistry. And behind energy is information. So if you think about your television screen and what appears on the television screen, of course there's an electrical cable, but that electric cable carries electricity, and electricity carries information, otherwise there'd be no picture on the screen. So human beings are body, matter, energy, information, quantum systems, and body, emotions, mind, spirit. So we can't leave out emotion, mind, and spirit from the whole complex of illness. And I think the integrative model tries to do that. We now have expanded our understanding away from pathology and biochemistry to energy, information, consciousness.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I mean, that's kind of then the distinction between natural medicine and scientific medicine, which is another chapter in your book.
Yeah, so the conventional model confines itself to pathology and diseases, which are what I call endpoints. So let's take an example, would be, say, cancer. You've got cancer, which is pathology. We remove the cancer, send the patient home and say, come back in 6 months' time. Well, what are they leaving behind when they take out the cancer? That they've left behind all the underlying dysfunctionalities which have led to the cancer. We know that cancer takes 10, 15, 20 years to develop. Why is that? What's happening underneath the cancer is a whole range of dysfunctionalities like liver detox mechanism problems, nutritional deficiencies, methylation problems, mitochondrial. So there's a whole range of biochemical dysfunctionalities underlying the problem of disease. So a good metaphor is a motor car. The motor car doesn't come out of the factory 100% perfect, but doesn't break down immediately. It gets out of tune, and slowly, if you leave it out of tune, it breaks down. If you fix the part that's broken and send the car back again to the patient without doing a tune-up and without speaking to the driver, that's a bad mechanic. Well, medical doctors do that all the time. You know, they remove the cancer and send the patient home. What's the patient been sent home with? A whole range of dysfunctions. They haven't changed his diet, they haven't looked at his exercise, all that which leads to the disease entity, which is an endpoint. It comes at the end. Diseases are endpoint diagnosis. In integrative medicine, we look at the underlying dysfunctionality, and then we look at the causes. And we know the causes of most diseases are well known. It's wrong food, poor food choices, I should say, not necessarily wrong food, but poor food choices for you, lack of exercise, stresses, things like toxins in the environment, your whole microbiome, the bacteria in your gut. All these are the underlying causes, and doctors just dismiss them, or they just haven't got time to deal with it. There's not, maybe they don't necessarily dismiss it in their own minds, but in a 10, 15-minute consultation, you know, they can't deal with the underlying causes. So that's unfortunately where medicine has gone. And the integrative model, you know, I can spend my whole first consultation just trying to identify the causes, not the cause, because there's no single cause. There's no possibility. There isn't a single disease with a single cause. It's multi-causal. And all these underlying causes lead to a range of underlying stresses in the systems of the body. And there are thousands of systems in the body. And those systems eventually lead to a breakdown, which is what we call the disease.
Sure. So, I mean, it really comes back to basics again. You know, I always like talking about it in terms of our Paleolithic ancestors and how long we've evolved as humans and how quickly things have changed in the last couple of 100 years. And, you know, can we keep up as a species? And, you know, are we adaptable enough to deal with the radical changes in our environment?
Look, I'm always astonished at how rapid the body can recover. You know, one of Brom's rules is you don't need to fill up all the holes. Okay. And it's true, you don't need to fill up all the holes, and even the holes that you fill up don't need to be filled to the maximum. It's sometimes just a small little change, like taking vitamin D or taking omega-3s. Small changes, taking a multivitamin can help the body to heal itself. So the body doesn't need always a lot of things to actually shift it. And once you just, I mean, sometimes if you take the placebo response, for example, I mean, what's a placebo response? It's a doctor-patient relationship. That's a placebo response. It doesn't need much. It often means nothing more than the doctor putting his hands on the patient's shoulder before he leaves, and that can shift everything.
Sure.
So the body has, I mean, I've written a paper on the placebo response, and the placebo response varies between 8 and 81% in different trials. Well, there's no drug that can beat 81%. 81% is major. And what is a placebo response? It's not a sugar-coated pill. It's the environment. It's the doctor-patient environment and the way the doctor handles the consultation and the meaning that the patient gives to that consultation. That's a placebo response. And yet it can heal anything. There isn't there's not a single drug trial that they're allowed to do without a placebo aspect to it, because the placebo is so powerful. Sure. And nobody investigates the placebo. It's the most powerful drug we have. We don't maximize in a way the placebo response, and yet we have in our hands, because we don't understand the placebo. It's not just a question of the thinking mind. It's something else, much deeper. It's much more magical, much more mystical, much more. Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon, the placebo. We don't really truly understand it. I mean, you can even give a patient a pill and tell them that it's a placebo. And they'll come back to you and say, no, you were trying to fool us. It's not really a placebo. It's really a drug. It was a placebo. But that's how it works. It's very strange. You could try to remove people that you think are placebo sensitives, because the drug companies don't like placebos. And you can remove them, and other people start to respond to placebo. So it's very strange. I don't want to say I understand the placebo. It's not straightforward at all. But I love the idea of it, and it really requires just a good doctor-patient relationship.
Sure. So that's most important. Again, just how powerful connection and caring really is.
Exactly. But that's what it's all about. And that's why I think integrative doctors do so well in one sense, because they listen to their patients, they give their patient time. I know some integrative doctors will spend 2 hours in the first consultation.
Sure.
So it's just that interaction, the dance, the magic of it all. Because there is a kind of magic for me, because we're always dealing with unknown factors. Human beings we can't say we know this human being in front of us. It's full of unknowns. Pathology is one thing, but when you get past pathology into the person, that the human being is a magical being. It's body, emotions, mind, spirit, consciousness. And all that is just beautiful stuff. We need to kind of put our hands right into that space, and not just confine it to the physicality and the pathology of the disease.
The power of belief coming in there.
Power of belief. Yeah, all that is part of the healing process, and that tends to be often denied and left out in order to try and be scientific, And the thing is about the gold standard of science is the double blinds. We have two groups of people, and you compare the two groups, but the two groups have to be identical. Now, you tell me how you can have two groups that are identical. The only thing that can be identical is the disease. They all got Parkinson's disease, but they all have different fingerprints. They all have different liver functions. They all have a whole range of genetics which are different. And so everybody's totally different. So how can you have two groups that are to compare them to? You can't. It's impossible. And that's the gold standard of scientific medicine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So maybe we can chat a little bit about how your experience has been of drugs versus natural products.
So look, I don't want to knock drugs too much because I think there really is a place for them when the system is totally chaotic. Drugs can bring a certain amount of order into the system.
Mm.
So there is a place for drugs, but the integrative model. I mean, I was unusual in the sense that I chose to see, is it possible to treat disease without drugs? But most integrated doctors use drugs, and they complement it
Mm.
with lifestyle management, which is the one arm. So the three arms of integrated medicine. The one arm is lifestyle management. The second arm is optimizing function, and the third arm is treating with drugs and surgery when appropriate. So that is the three arms of integrated medicine. It doesn't deny modern medicine at all. There's a big place for modern medicine, certainly in acute diseases, and there is a place, but yeah. But even in acute diseases, I mean, you know, as an acupuncturist, I've seen astonishing things happen just with one needle, you know, with injuries and things like that. So, yeah, so I think we need to open up this field of medicine and stop denying that there's no science to natural medicine. There's plenty science, you know. And if you include the science of experience, I mean, I love the science of experience. You know, my interest. I love talking to doctors who have got experience in something. I prefer to talk to them than to go to a peer-reviewed journal, which is boring as hell. You know, but peer-reviewed journals are boring. I mean, they talk about one drug or one. You know, I want to listen to my colleagues who have got lots of experience in using a range of products. You know, so, which brings me to an interesting thing that maybe needs to be clarified, because when we talk about, let's say, anti-inflammatories, you know, we often talk about natural anti-inflammatories and a drug anti-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a drug that's an anti-inflammatory and something like curcumin, which is a natural anti-inflammatory, or omega-3, which is a natural inflammatory? There is a difference between the two, because a drug is very, very, very powerful. And that's why it has side effects, because it comes in and blocks, if it's an anti-inflammatory, it blocks the inflammatory process. But you know, the body itself has inflammatory and anti-inflammatory processes. So if you injure yourself, the body brings in inflammation, because inflammation is the way the body heals. Mm. But you don't want to have constant inflammation there. You want to be able to, at some point, modulate the inflammatory process and bring in anti-inflammatory processes. So the body has both inflammatory and anti-inflammatory processes. They need to come, and they got to work in a very creative, intelligent way. So when we talk about a drug, anti-inflammatory, we mean that the drug actually stops the inflammatory process. It's powerful enough to stop it. There's no natural medicine that's powerful enough to stop it. It doesn't do work that way. When we talk about a natural anti-inflammatory, we mean that it's supporting the body's own natural anti-inflammatory processes. Okay. That's the difference. There aren't any natural, I mean, there are herbs that are poisonous, but herbalists don't use them. You know, they are used by pharmaceutical companies like Digitalis and colchicine. These are very poisonous herbs. But naturopaths don't use poisonous herbs. They use herbs which support the body's own innate physiological processes. And the body has both always. In every way, this body is full of polarities: inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, contraction, relaxation phenomena. The immune system has two arms which oppose each other. There's a sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. So the body is full of these opposing forces, and they're all balanced. When you take a drug, you are interfering with a physiological process which may be useful, but you're still interfering. Natural medicines don't interfere, but they're not powerful enough to do that. They're really not powerful. Or what they're doing is supporting function. You're using them to support function. And by supporting function, you're raising the body's ability to heal itself.
Sure. So I mean,
Because if you think about it, the only reason why a person's getting ill is because function is going downhill. So if you can put function back up again, that function will heal itself.
okay. So I mean, fundamentally, it's supporting the body's innate capacities rather than just squashing symptoms with powerful things.
You're not a drug. If you listen to the names of drugs, antihistamines, beta blockers, serotonin uptake inhibitors, they all interfere with function, which may be useful in a certain circumstance, but that's not the model that the integrative doctors are using. The model that they use is, how do we support health? How do we optimize functionality, not interfere with function? So it's just, but that's why I say most integrative doctors will use drugs when they see it's appropriate. But they start off with, if they can, by supporting health and see what the body can do to heal itself. Because obviously, if the body heals itself, it's healthier than it was before.
And not dependent on something.
No. But I think that today we really need to return back to lifestyle, because, you know, that is, you get more mileage to health than any natural medicine. You get more mileage to health just by changing your food choices, exercise, and stress management. Just those simple things, you know, is where you're going to get more mileage than anything else. If you think that the placebo response works without remedies, the placebo response doesn't need any vitamin, mineral, or any drug. You get spontaneous healing happening. So the real ability to heal starts really at the simplest level, which is check your food choices, listen to your intuition, because food choices are not straightforward. I mean, when you look today, what's happening in food choice realm, high fat, low carb, plant-based diet, you know, Paleolithic diet. I mean, it's so damn confusing. I mean, it's very, very difficult to sort it out, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I've always been partial to just eating clean food that's produced as naturally as possible. The bigger the factory, the more potential risks.
Yeah, I know, that's what I feel too. Is that, you know, I tend to push for the plant-based diet. You know, I know that old Tim Noakes and the Banting diet, you know, is these high oils, high fats. I'm not really into that particular model of choosing. You know, I prefer. I mean, my cleansing diet, which is my so-called cleansing diet, started off with potatoes and onions, as I said. But I mean, my cleansing diet today is really basically a vegetarian diet. You know, I still believe that simple vegetables and fruit, a little bit of fruit, is really the best way to go if you're wanting to look at starting to cleanse the system and let the system get on top of the toxins that are sitting inside it, because we're all toxic. We're all full of toxins, all in everything, the water, the air, food we eat. You know, it's such a lot of toxins today. Yeah.
So I wanted to go back quickly just to the drugs versus natural products. I mean, I've noticed that over the years in South Africa, laws start changing and certain natural remedies are no longer available anymore. Can you give us a little bit of insight on what's been going on there and why that's been happening?
Yeah, look, I think that some of the remedies, you know, they are really powerful natural remedies, you know, and things like melatonin, which is now registered, so you have to get a prescription for melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a hormone, a very, very powerful hormone. And I'm very, very cautious with hormones, all hormones, whether it's progesterone or estrogen. You know, one does have to be a little bit careful when you're using those powerful natural nutrients. You know, they can cause a lot of disturbances in the body if you don't know what you're doing. So I think there is a place for some of the regulations around it. The big problem today is that they're wanting to put all natural medicines under the same category as drugs. Okay. And that's an enormous danger that could happen here if they push that regulation through. But we are fighting the court case at the moment to try get a separate regulation for natural medicine. It doesn't make any sense they're not drugs. They don't have the side effect profile as drugs because they're not used to interfere with the functionality like a drug is. Drug is a simple, stupid chemical that has a very important place, but it comes in with power. It's a masculine dominating mindset, the drug scene, whereas natural medicines are feminine. They are come to nourish. They nourish the system. They are the feminine side of medicine. So there's a place for drugs. There's a place for natural medicines. They both are, in a way, should be complementary to each other. You know, but because of this split that's happened today, and the way people view them, you know, it's created this barrier of coming together. But integrative medicine tries to draw them together, but the regulations today are a little bit dangerous if they regulate it in the way they're wanting to go, which is to put all natural medicines under the same umbrella as drugs. It would kill the natural medicine market completely because there's no way they can do it. You can't patent a natural medicine. You can patent a drug. So that's your safety. So you can do research on a drug because you can patent it. But you can't patent vitamin C, can't patent magnesium. So nobody's going to do the research to have it registered, you see. So that's the problem. So it will kill the natural medicine market completely.
I expect the traditional healers of South Africa won't really stand for that. It must impact them too.
It will, and so I think they're also on our side in one sense, you know, and we're on their side. So I think at the moment it's going through the courts. We got some good people there, good lawyers working to try and get a separate regulatory process for. So we have a regulation for foods, we have a regulation for drugs, and then we should have a separate regulation for natural medicine. That's what we're aiming for, and right at the moment it's stuck in the courts.
Sure. Because I mean, one of the things that always concerns me about these big drug companies is conflicts of interests. You know, so much of science, when it's paid for by a big organization, it's amazing how, I don't know if it's a placebo at work, but they just happen to get the results they're looking for.
Yeah, you know, the thing is that as I said, the scientific model the scientific model is not necessarily appropriate for human beings, because we are each so unique in every possible way. As I said, with different fingerprints, the whole physiology of each person is totally unique. So to subject this unique person to science doesn't make any sense to me, you know. I mean, you can talk about bigger numbers, like 1,000 people. Well, you got 1,000 individuals. You can have 2,000 people, you've got 2,000 individuals. I'm not sure that increasing the numbers will give you a better scientific picture. So I think that we are kind of fooled when it comes to scientific medicine. I mean, there's lots of good stuff there, but one has to be careful of the limitations. That's why I call my definition of medicine is that medicine is an art that uses science to measure what can be measured. But most things can't be measured. So that's why it's an art, because you can't measure emotions, you can't measure thinking, you can't measure soul, you can't measure spirit, you can't measure feeling, you can't measure all these qualities that make us human can't be measured. That's why medicine is an art and not a science. But it can use science to measure what can be measured. But most things can't be measured. So that's why it's an art. And because it's an art, we have to be careful of subjecting this artistic piece called a human being to the scientific model, which is so restrictive.
So giving 7 billion people the same vaccine for a strong strain of flu is...
Exactly, you know, exactly. So we are so unique in every possible way, you know, right through and through our energetics, through the information that we carry, through our connection to soul, spirit, all this stuff that, you know, and So each person is just beautifully unique in every possible way. That means that the illnesses that they have are also unique, because the background of the illness. It's when you give a diagnosis, the same diagnosis, Parkinson's disease, that you think you're dealing with the same problem. It's not. If you could trace each person with Parkinson's disease backwards to the origin, you'll see how different each one of them is. So the endpoint may be covered under the same diagnosis, the Parkinson's disease. But 10 people with Parkinson's disease, if you could trace them backwards, which you can't, but if you could, you'll see the causes of each one of them is all different. The underlying dysfunctionalities are different, but the endpoint is similar. So we have to be careful, because we stick to the endpoint and the diagnosis, and now we say we know what's going on, and that's not true.
Sure. So maybe, so we've only got a few minutes left. You know, a lot of people are dealing with much higher levels of stress and anxiety these days with the crazy regulations that have come through. What have you got, maybe just your top tips for people to deal with stress and anxiety in a more integrated way?
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I keep saying to people, you can choose to be an optimist or a pessimist. But if you choose to be a pessimist, you're going to feel pessimistic. And every single cell in your body is going to be surrounded by pessimistic chemicals. So in one sense, it's stupid to be a pessimist. You might as well choose to be an optimist. And if you're going to be an optimist, you have two choices. You can be a conditional optimist or an unconditional optimist. If you're a conditional optimist, you're going to become a pessimist if the situation gets bad enough. So you have no choice but to be an unconditional optimist.
Wow.
So choose that, because the words that you're using are going to create the experience that you're having. So if you talk about a problem, you're going to feel problematic inside yourself. Is that what you want to live with? So choose to see it as an opportunity rather than as a problem, because it's not that it's an opportunity or a problem, but it's a choice you make that will give you the experience that you have. So if you're uncomfortable inside yourself, be careful of the words that you're using to describe your reality.
Sure. That's profound. We can definitely put that on a poster and have it on a highway somewhere.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's one way to start dealing with your stuff inside you. You know, you got to find that spot inside yourself where there is inner peace, because it's there. It's not outward. It's not out there. You're never going to find it out there. It's not going to be another person or another place that's going to make you happy. It's discovering the inner peace inside yourself. And there is a place of inner peace inside yourself. And it's got nothing to do with your thinking mind or your emotions. It's deeper than that, just below the surface, very close to your heart.
Sure. So I would expect you recommend things like meditation and breathing.
Yeah, meditation is absolutely, you know, that's the secret of meditation is to get beyond the thinking emotional self, actually, because it's the thinking emotional self where the noise is. And if you can get past the thinking emotional self, you come to the place of what I call the inner temple, where it's where there's inner peace. And to find that inner peace, it's got nothing to do with money or people or spaces. It's got to do with discovering that place inside yourself. It's always there. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just that you're making so much noise with your thinking mind and emotions. Anyway.
Yeah, don't associate too strongly with a hamster wheel. It's going to run.
Yeah, no. No, exactly. Yeah.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I mean, that's been so informative, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to get a lot out of that. So I'm just curious if anyone's got questions for Dr. Brom. Now is the moment, because if we don't have any questions for him, we're going to let him get back to his evening at home, relaxing. So guys, if you got anything, you can type it in the chat screen. Otherwise, we're gonna love and leave you. Wow. Well, we have one comment that it was so informative. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Looks like we covered everyone's deepest questioning. That was very impressive.
Very good. Thank you so much. I mean, it's a lovely process for me anyway, to talk about my passion. You know, what does it say? What if one struggles to?
If one struggles to keep one's weight up on a healthy diet, what is considered a healthy weight?
A healthy weight is the weight that makes you feel very comfortable and good, actually. You know, I think, I mean, they obviously, the question of being overweight is a big one, and I don't want to go into that whole story around it. But yeah, I think in general, if you feel comfortable with your weight and you feel that that's the right weight, you know, the whole question of what is normal is problematic for me. You know, it's not straightforward. The question of what is normal. One really needs to dance through this process of what is normal. Yeah.
And then Heidi wanted to know, is your book easily available? Where can people find your book?
You can get it on Amazon. I know that it's there, and I know that Wellness Warehouse in Cape Town has it, and Organic Zone in Cape Town has it, and a few other health shops. I know in Neisner, that health shop on the island.
Organic.
They have some of my books as well. Yeah. Otherwise, they can just email me.
I have also put the link to your website in the chat right at the top, creatinghealth.co.za. So you guys can have a look there.
Okay.
Some great resources there too.
Okay.
And one more question there. Someone wants to know, what is the downside of a vegetarian and a vegan diet? I'm not so sure we have the time left to really delve into that deeply, but give us your top thoughts.
You know, it's just a question of, I'm much more for all food types, actually, although the vegetarian is still my or plant-based diet is my preferred choice. But sorry, what was the question?
What is the downside of a vegetarian?
Is that you're going to miss out on some, especially the amino acids, because a lot of the amino acids tend to be in the meat and the fish and things like that. And amino acids are the precursors for your neurotransmitters. So like tryptophan and 5-hydroxytryptophan and all these amino acids, tyrosine, these are the precursors for your neurotransmitters. So sometimes a lot of people can get depressed on a purely vegan diet because they're not getting sufficient of the amino acids.
Okay, yeah. And I go through that in quite a lot of detail on my events and courses, because it's definitely something I've worked with, having been a raw vegan for 7 years and shifting my perspective of that over time. There was one more question. Liza was asking about yellow fever, whether there's still homeopathic vaccines available.
I mean, there's homeopathic vaccines available for any condition.
Okay.
You know, just a question of the laboratory making it up for you. So there's one laboratory called Fusion Homeopath Laboratory, Fusion, 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 and if they make contact with that laboratory, they can probably make it up or will have it in stock.
Okay, fantastic. Brilliant. Well, guys, if you have any friends and family that would like to have a look at this chat, we will be putting it on our website in the next couple of days. I'll paste the link for that. So you can share the love further and wider. Otherwise, next week's guest is going to be me. I think I'm going to do a roundup. We've had so many amazing speakers on over the last month that I'm just going to run through some of the key things that everyone discussed and do a bit of a Q&A. So if you guys want to join that, it'll just be more of a free rolling with me. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Brom. Really appreciate it. And we wish you the best of health.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm going to get back to my fire now.
I'm gonna unmute everybody so everyone could just say good night and thank you. It's always a nice way of ending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.